people talk about Knights of the Old Republic, the conversation usually goes to the twist, the companions, or how it's one of the best Star Wars stories ever told. And all of these are fair, those things matter of course. But whenever I play KOTOR, the thing that stands out more to me than anything else in the game is how political the game feels in a very quiet, almost subtle way. Not political in a modern real-world sense, but political in how it thinks about power, authority, control, and ideology. KOTOR isn't just telling a story about Jedi and Sith, it's asking questions about the systems behind them, about who holds power, how they justify it, and who ends up paying the price when those systems fail. And what I find really interesting is that the game never tells you what to think. It doesn't give you a neat answer, it just lets you exist in these structures long enough to notice their flaws. Now, this is all just my reading of the game, of course, but it's one of the bigger reasons as to why KOTOR has managed to stick with me for so long. On paper, the Galactic Republic is the good side. It represents democracy, unity, and stability. But the more time you spend in KOTOR, the more fragile that idea starts to feel. Everywhere you go, you see cracks. Bureaucracy slows everything down. Decisions take too long. People on the ground feel abandoned. Entire planets are left to fend for themselves while the Republic argues over procedure. To me, the Republic in KOTOR feels less like a strong, governing body and more like a system barely holding itself together. It relies heavily on the Jedi to solve problems it can't handle on its own, which already creates an imbalance of power. And what's interesting is that the game doesn't portray this as some shocking revelation. It's just the background reality of the world. Regular people complain, soldiers feel exhausted, leaders feel distant. It feels less like a heroic institution and more like a political system overwhelmed by the scale of its own responsibilities. This is where things start to get really interesting. The Jedi are framed as peacekeepers, but KOTOR quietly shows them as something closer to an ideological authority. They don't just protect the Republic, they shape how it functions. The Jedi Code emphasizes emotional control, detachment, and obedience to a doctrine. And while those ideas are presented as necessary to prevent chaos, the game constantly shows how limiting they can be. Many Jedi seem disconnected from the people they're meant to protect. Compassion is encouraged, but only within strict boundaries. Emotional attachment is framed as dangerous, even when it's deeply human. To me, the Jedi in KOTOR feel less like moral guides and more like an institution trying to maintain control through discipline. Not because they're evil, but because they believe order is more important than an individual experience. And the game never outright condemns this, it just lets you see the consequences. On the other end of the spectrum, you have the Sith. They're easy to dismiss as purely evil, but KOTOR gives them a surprisingly coherent ideology. The Sith believe in personal freedom, strength, and self-determination, taken to an extreme. They reject restraint, they reject submission, they see power as something you claim for yourself, not something granted by tradition or a hierarchy. And that's what makes them dangerous, but also what makes them appealing. To me, the Sith represent what happens when individualism goes completely unchecked, when freedom becomes justification for domination, when personal will outweighs responsibility to others. KOTOR doesn't portray the Sith as monsters. It portrays them as people who genuinely believe their worldview is more honest than the Jedi's restraint. And that tension between control and chaos sits at the heart of the game.
Is this wise? The ancient Jedi sealed this archway. If we pass beyond this door, we can never go back. The Order will surely banish us. Are the secrets of the Star Forge so valuable? Can its power truly be worth the risk?
What really sells KOTOR's politics is where it places you as the player. You're never fully outside these systems. You don't overthrow them overnight. You operate within their rules, their expectations, their limitations. Even your choices are constrained by the structures around you. Being good or evil isn't just about morality, it's about alignment with a philosophy. And I think that that's intentional. The game isn't asking you to fix everything. It's asking you to reflect on how power works, and how difficult it is to escape systems once you're a part of them. To me, that feels surprisingly mature for a game of its time. And replaying it in 2025, it shocked me how similar some things in the game match current movements in the modern day.
You are like all the rest. You will not see the truth. On the day of reckoning, you will suffer with the rest of the alien lathers.
Come on, we should keep moving. Cook or no, people like him can make trouble for us.
One of the things I appreciate the most in KOTOR is that it never turns into a lecture when it talks about politics. There aren't long speeches about ideology. Instead, politics are communicated through side quests, planetary conflicts, and your companion perspectives. You see how decisions ripple outward, how ideology affects real people. It feels grounded, messy, and incomplete, and that's what makes it believable. Looking at KOTOR now, I think this approach is something a lot of modern games shy away from. Many RPGs talk about choice, but they avoid letting those choices challenge the systems of the world itself. And KOTOR doesn't shy away from that discomfort. Instead, it presents multiple flawed ideologies and asks you to live with the tension between them. There's no perfect answer, and that's kind of the point. In a franchise often reduced to clear heroes and villains, KOTOR allows Star Wars to be complicated, political, and human, and that's why it feels relevant today. For me, Knights of the Old Republic isn't just memorable because of its story or its characters. It's memorable because of how quietly thoughtful it is. It doesn't shout its themes, it doesn't demand agreement, it just builds a world where power, ideology, and responsibility constantly clash, and lets you find your own meaning within it. That restraint is rare, and it's still why, even years later, KOTOR still feels worth talking about. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing, and potentially checking out the other videos on the channel as they have a similar style to this one. And if you do show your support in this video, I will be making a video on the sequel, so you should stick around for that. In the meantime, and until then, bye-bye.